welcome you all in this, at least in Vienna, it's a rainy afternoon. Usually when we are having the conferences in person, then we are joking that everything all the presentations scheduled on the Friday afternoon are kind of graveyard shift because everybody is tired, everybody wants to go home, catch a plane or something. Now you don't have the excuse that you have to catch the plane, but still, I would like to thank you with entertaining you now for the rest of the last part of the week. If I don't succeed completely, please be gentle for me because I'm introvert engineer, so don't expect a lot of I don't know, presentation skills and everything. But let's see. Anyway, let's start with the how to successfully execute back office process automation. I will not talk to you about the theory of it. I would like to share with you a few stories about how we did it in the Erste group, what we did, how we did it, what went well, what we screw up completely. So a kind of collection of the lessons learned for you, which I hope it will be useful. So let's start talking about the stories. My HR is usually in internal communications, also telling me you need to tell, who we are, what are our revenues and everything. So I will skip that. I will just tell you a few interesting facts. The Erste Group was founded 201 years ago here in Vienna, in Austria. This is the building where everything started in the center of Vienna. In the meantime, it looks like this. So it's still there, holding in the center. It started actually as one of the trivia, as the name says, Erste Bank der Österreichische Sparkasse, and this means this is the first bank which was built in Austrian monarchy 200 years ago for the people like us who did not have the access to the financial markets. And actually the bank is in the ownership of the foundation, which is also quite of interesting because most of banks have their own foundation to kind of wash the face. But we are owned by the foundation, so all the money which a bank earns, besides the shares which are on the open markets, are going to this foundation, which is financing a lot of social projects altogether. Where do we operate? This is the Central and Eastern Europe, so mostly the area of foreign Austrian monarchy and parts of former Yugoslavia. And of course, in the meantime, we have moved to one very interesting building called, very innovatively, campus. That's all about my company. If you don't see a good video, I have two faces. One face of me is, I actually worked I played ice hockey as a kid. I'm still active in it when I'm not doing professionally IT and managing the IT project. So if I will have to switch the video, that's how I look like. Now let's switch to the robot phase. Whenever I'm going to some conference and when somebody is speaking about the robotics and automatic process automation, they usually start with a picture like this, which is kind of cool. But on the other hand, it's also dangerous if you are trying to sell in your organization robotic processing with this kind of picture, because you are immediately creating, I would say, wrong expectations, because people who are not technical, you hope they will not expect that robots are walking the corridors once when you implement it, but you would be surprised how many people have a bit different understanding. When we started with this about 3 years ago, of course, people knowing and expecting robots to look like this, there was, in one hand, a lot of excitement because now some creatures will walk the corridors. On the other hand, of course, you can imagine there will be a lot of fear. Then we try to circumvent this fear in order to tell them, look, it's not going to be robots walking the corridors, it will be robots walking on computers, which was kind of relaxing them, but then they were expecting robots working on the computers. Still thinking, okay, they are going to sit on their places, working on their computers, they are going to replace them as people and so on. It all will be terrible. Then we try to explain them, look, it's not robots working on the computers, there will be actually robots working in the computers. And then they realize, well, probably this will, once when we introduce the robots, it will look something like this, which is now in this Corona time, actually how most of offices look like, with or without robots. Actually, there are people taking their laptops home, so there is nobody who left open a computer on their desk. But actually, if you are thinking how your environment or back office could look like once when you in part of the team introduce robots, probably it will look something like this, because the robots, as you know, are not the robots, physical robots, but actually pieces of software performing some automated activities on the programs as if mimicking people are doing it. If you are able to explain it like that, you will still, if you are working in a financial institution like me, still have a problem explaining it to your CFO. What exactly do you want to achieve? First. Second, how much it will really cost? Because as you can imagine, banks are heavily driven by budgets and the risk. I mean, the risk management is quite important topic in a bank. And they will all expect, okay, those robots are not at the computer, but in the computer, but still it's a robot. It's something very, very expensive. You need to start selling that story in several different aspects. So again, if you are trying to implement that story in the financial institution, which, for example, just to give you the feeling how much we are spending on IT in the entire Erste group, which is consisting of 7 banks in 7 countries, and most of those banks are among top 3 on their market. The total volume which is spent on IT, including maintenance, including projects, including everything what is related to IT, is about €500 million a year, 500 million euros. It's a huge amount of money. Of course, if you are now talking about robots all of a sudden in the boardroom, they will expect that those costs are going to jump significantly up. So first part, which was our challenge, is to explain them, look guys, here we talk about a piece of software actually, which is not that expensive in general, but could bring certain benefits in a quite short time period. So actually jumping on the train of the low investment was the first thing where we started to break the barriers of it. Second one, as mentioned, banks are very, very risk averse. This is the essence of the banking business. Actually, banks are the only institutions which have the role of chief risk officer in the board. So there is one board member who takes care about risks in general. And one thing which was very useful for us, not only for the CFO, CEO, and those financially driven guys, but also for the IT guys, to explain them, to say, look, the biggest fear which banks currently have when it comes into introduction of the new system is their legacy systems and interaction and integration with the legacy system, which is extremely, extremely painful, extremely cost consuming. And one of the things which was helping us to explain them that they shouldn't be afraid of this software called robots is that they are non-invasive products, as we call them. Non-invasive means you don't have to integrate them with any systems. It practically, after the installations, you can run them on our laptops, on the working machines. And they don't require typical classical integration with the systems because they are practically mimicking the usage of the humans interacting with the front end of the system. The second one, which is the third one, sorry, which is still in the financial domain and helping us to break through the idea of introducing the robots, was the time to market, with which you still should be very careful because as I will show later, the time to market is rather fast and can be rather fast, but you need to be careful if you are selling that as a sold proposition for your board members, is because those robots are very much dependable on the releases of the software they are supposed to run and use. And the return on investment has to be very fast, because in case you are changing your software versions and upgrading, which you are doing regularly, there could be a case that you have to redo or reconfigure all your robots which you are doing. So in that context, although it's a powerful argument, you need to be careful. I'll come to those details a little bit later. The fourth argument which we were using was related to reliability and scalability. And this one was quite a useful one, especially now in the times of the cost cuttings and everything, where we were able to explain, look, I mean, robot is a piece of software which works on a computer, and when you go home, it can still work, which means it can work 24/7. Of course, if you configure it that well that it doesn't require constant supervision, it can work practically when nobody else works. So it's giving you a certain edge in comparison to humans who are working, of course, in the working hours. And it can be easily scalable to replace several people doing the automated task. And this does not require investments, and as people are used to when onboarding the other employees. The fifth one was related to accuracy and consistency, meaning that if you are introducing robots in the areas where you want to replace the manual input of certain fields, of course that you are increasing the accuracy, meaning lowering the amount of potential errors with the typing. But I will also mention this thing closer to the end. With accuracy, you need to be careful what exactly are you introducing and replacing, what kind of manual input, because at some point of time you can realize that for some solution, although they look great and fantastic and that they can increase the productivity quite well, you should still consider, is the robot the right thing to solve that problem? I'll come to that later. And then finally, this one was very crucial, especially when HR was considered, because with all this, there was a quite huge expectation created in the boardroom that, well, how many workplaces we can save by introducing robots, meaning, of course, how many people we can release. And it comes as a surprise that actually, if you are talking about systems, IT systems that are replacing human work, you can actually argue that very clearly with also retention, in the sense of if you are replacing manual work, well, let's call it very boring manual paper pushing work with the systems, this leaves more time for something more interesting, for those who are, of course, interested to do something more interesting. And we managed to actually sell it quite well internally, and not sell it in a way that we were faking it, but we really thought about it, and this was our proposition, especially to the youngsters working in the back office, to tell them, look, as we are configuring those robots who are replacing piece of this boring repetitive work, this leaves you really literally much more time to do something more meaningful, maybe even move out of the back office and work on the front office with the clients and so on. So this was quite a good selling proposition for the people, which was important, because those people who are actually doing currently the jobs which are supposed to be replaced by robot, you need those people actually to configure those robots. And I will talk about this also a little bit later. However, you need to be careful with those propositions, because, as mentioned, when you are selling an idea of introducing robots, you are creating quite high expectations and potentially bringing yourself a lot of enemies. If you want to be successful in introduction of it, you have to take care of several factors, and I will just run through 4 of them, which we found very, very important, because we were not communicating it properly at the beginning, and it created us quite a lot of problems down the road. First one is, we would call it, you are missing the point. When we started introducing robots, we started to look at the processes where, let's call it first low-hanging fruits, where there is quite a lot of interaction of the people typing in some pieces of information in the systems. We were looking, okay, in which cases there is quite a lot of typing in which could be replaced by those robots, and we introduced actually in several cases, and we were very proud of that point, when we replaced in a back office several interfaces where the back office people had to introduce, actually built in, not built, type in into the systems big complex deals for the large corporate customers, which were coming from the origination systems, several different origination systems. And as mentioned, we were very proud that we have managed to replace the manual work, but the problem was, if you are having interface, front-end interface, where somebody is retyping data which they got printed out from some other system, you should consider, well, this piece of paper is coming from the printer and it comes to the print from some other system. So why in the hell we are taking two different systems and retyping and transferring information through the front end? Why don't we connect backends directly? And why don't we do it in a completely different way and automate it, not with robots, but with classical interfaces on the middle layer? Not everything is possible, but before you are doing a lot of and configuring a lot of beautiful robots, you should have a look, is there a better way? Because producing a lot of robots is also not the best thing you can imagine, and I will mention it also later. The other topic is, as mentioned, we talked a lot about robots not walking down the corridors, but being in the computers, being pieces of software, doing something. And of course, this creates a lot of attention in direction of, well, this is IT stuff only. Don't bother us with that. I mean, bring a few good IT guys and they will do everything, and then so on. Robots are kind of sound like very techy stuff, but they are not, and they cannot be, because again, robot is just a tool which needs actually the input from those guys who are doing those boring works, and it cannot be successful if you will consider it only from purely IT technical perspective. There are some areas in our company where we did use it in IT purely, and this was used in the IT when we were doing the regression testing for the system upgrades. You could consider, okay, this is pure IT work, but again, this was only one of the use cases in the organization where accidentally the most of people using the system were the IT guys. But again, robotization is not IT project, at least not only IT project, and for that, to be successful, you need people from the back office who are doing the work to actually explain and after all, configure those robots by themselves. The third topic is related to the organization and the governance. What do those guys from the tribe have to do with it? Well, it has to do with it because at one point of time, we were tempted to make very agile-ish organization structure about the robotization, to say, okay, look, we will create a tribe of the people who are going to deal with this robotization. They are going to introduce these robots to various areas of the banks. They should potentially talk to each other, but since this is the configuration of the robots for completely different areas, they could be completely separated from some kind of central organization and work together with the business without any coordination needed, which was quite successful at the very, very beginning. However, as the story further on, what happened is that they were not using the same tools. They were using it in quite different ways. Second of all, there was a problem that they fall in love with those systems which they are doing, and practically the creating robot and robotizing everything became the purpose to itself. They created a lot of robots, but again, back to the point one, many of those robots were done on the processes where there were better ways to do it. So we learned quite late that some kind of central coordination and overview what all those teams are doing was absolutely essential. Not fully centralized in a way that only those central teams can do something in any area of organization, but at least that there are certain standards used, that those people are properly trained, not only in a way how to use robots, but when to use them, and also to ensure that once when those robots are implemented, that we have a complete overview how many systems are practically, I don't want to say without human supervision, but that something is happening without too much human interaction. And in case some changes are needed in the processes, where is actually the overview, who has the overview, how many robots are in the organization doing something. And the final one was coming to the point of the HR again. Famous, what is in for me? Again, with robots, it is not the secret that if you are introducing them in the organization to decrease the human work, and you need those people who are currently performing work to actually help you configure it, what you are actually selling to them is saying, look, help me configure that robot, and then you are not needed anymore. So let me configure the robot who will replace you, and then you don't have to come to the office anymore. Quite a harsh thing to say, and you can imagine that, of course, it will not help you bring the attention of the people whom you need, especially the people who are considering themselves, well, I'm here in this organization for quite a long time period, I know a lot. What the hell are you talking about? After all, if I'm replacing myself and I'm 5 years to retirement, well, maybe I'm not interested to doing it. I mean, yes, I know it's probably not the best thing for a bank, but why do I care? As mentioned, robotization is not purely IT stuff, it's business transformation. So believe it or not, at some point of time, very early, we realized that we need to evolve in all those activities which we are doing HR, not HR only in terms of considering, okay, the legal part of downsizing the workforce, but also reusing the people who are eager to learn something else, who are eager to learn maybe just to administer it and govern the robots, but to bring this as the different perspective, different opportunity, not only for those who are going to be replaced by robots, but also for those who are in a position to learn something new and actually create a new workplaces. So now we spoke quite a lot about what to do, how to do, why to do it, how to sell it, how not to sell it, and how to take care that it somehow goes. Now it's the time to say a little bit about, okay, now you sold the story, now you got the money, now you got the mandates to implement something. Now you have to make those robots dance. Probably not dance on the floor, but at least to do something useful. So how to do it? There are different ways to do it, as with every transformation project in general. Typical way to start is any project. I am, by the way, quite a lot worked as a project manager, is, well, start with the analysis. See what you want to do, define your processes, then define the tool which you would like to do, put the RFP for the tool, and blah, blah, blah. What we have realized actually that we could somehow make few shortcuts there and not start with the analysis and then think about, okay, what is the best tool, but actually do one step before and say, well, let's first choose the tool and then do the rest. This sounds a little bit tricky and suicidal, but what we have noticed is, first of all, there are not too many tools on the market yet. Typical suspects are Blue Prism, Tosca, and so on. And if you are IT organization, there is, and especially huge IT organization as we are, there is a fair chance that somebody in IT basement is already using some of those systems for some other purposes. So you already had bought the tool, first of all. Second of all, we did short comparison of these different tools and realized, well, there is no big difference between two of them, at least not such huge difference that it will justify running a full-scale RFI, RFP, comparison of the tools whatsoever, especially because we don't know yet where and how we are going to use it. We are still have to come to there. And I said, since differences are not huge, if you already have some tool, start with that tool, don't invent the wheel. If you want to buy the tool and you need a consulting company to help you, there are technical consulting companies who are very happy to help you. for a nice provision, of course, but each of them is in love with one of the tools. For example, Erste is very in love with Blue Prism. The Accenture, at least at the time when we were talking to them, was in love with Tosca, and so on. Take whatever is there and start with that. Don't make a big fuss about choosing the tool. Just pick one and start with the analysis. Analysis also shouldn't be a huge effort. You should primarily decide, so your first choice would be where to start, in which area. And as I said, we have already started partially in the IT area with test automation. And then we said, okay, back office seems to be a good starting point because there is a lot of manual entry in the systems done in the back office. So naturally, this is the good way to start to introduce robots to do that. However, then out of this first analysis, you will come up very soon in the conclusion, okay, there are 30-ish, 40-ish processes which use those manual entries. Then you need to very quickly stop into what you could call agile-ish world. Now you have to pick one, maximum two low-hanging fruits. Maybe not even the whole processes, but maybe only one manual entry, which is extremely painful for some of people working in the back office to get their attention and a buy-in. For example, our low-hanging fruit was it's not even the process. Actually, you could call it a process because it lasts very long. It's the entry of the contract data for syndicated loans. For those of you who don't know what are the syndicated loans, this is a huge and complex loan for a huge and complex corporate client, meaning one government wants to build a highway and they need €1 billion. There is no bank in the world who will give them €1 billion because of the risk, but they will say, well, let's 10 banks together offer 10 billion, this billion euros whatsoever. Let's distribute it among us, but then there are also different borrowers. Long story short, it's not one person borrowing money from a bank, it's multiple person and organization borrowing money for multiple banks. And as you can imagine, there are huge contractual, a piece of contractual work that needs to be done and entered into lending system to do it. In order to enter data from one loan into the system, the average operator needs from several hours up to one whole day, without exaggerating. One person types in data into the system the whole day, which of course was the best possible candidate to start the robotization. Second two steps are pretty much standard IT, saying, okay, fine, now we have to robotize that. Let's see how it works. Now let's see what this operator need to do in the whole day, typing into which screens, into what system, how it goes. Draft it somehow, configure this robot in a way that it can do this data, put this data in. What are we doing with changing the data and so on? So we took a simpler version of this complex process and we said, okay, we are not going to introduce it first for real entry of the real data, but we will use it for entry of the test data when we are doing the regression test of the software upgrade, because then you still have to enter some test deal, which still is very complex, but at least you have static data, meaning always entering the same stuff to have it comparable. So we did that. We did a deployment, and of course, we were very happy with the reaction of the back office people, which was, let's say, they were very excited, especially those who were spending hours up to one day to enter the deal, to see that a robot is able to do it within several seconds. So you can imagine the facial expression, which was something like this. Of course, when it worked. The last step, especially in the first round of implementation, is classical sprint review, which in our case, what we have learned is extremely important, especially in the first few rounds, because here is where you are learning your first lessons. Here is where you are doing your first decisions, what you did right, what you did wrong, and where will you go from there. For example, our first lesson we learned very painfully we did one completely stupid mistake which nobody was thinking about. The robots are done in a way that they are actually, when you are configuring a robot to do some entries in some form, you are actually, what you are doing is configuring that robot is entering not in the field in the form, but at exact place on the screen where this form will be when you need to enter the data, which was perfectly configured on the laptop of the developer. But once when we deployed it on the laptop of the lady who was in the back office doing those deals, she was surprisingly having a nice 24-inch screen in front of her, and something which was 100 pixel left and up from on the laptop was not, of course, 100 pixel left and right on the 24-inch screen. So practically only in deployment we realized that we need to reconfigure the entire robot. Very painful lesson learned, but of course, if we have started with development of 10 robots and then deploying the 10 robots, there will be quite a lot of time wasted down the drain. So we learned that lesson at the very beginning and find a way how to handle it in the future. But what I want to say, this step is very important, because after the step 5, you are actually going back in 2 directions, not back to the step 2 only. Back to the step 2 only, you will go only within the processes you put in the scope of analysis in the first step, where you will say, okay, now we have found out several processes in the first step, which we will do in several sprints. But it's also the moment in time where you should have a look and say, fine, so we will continue doing it in some rotations in the back office, but what else? What we have learned now, what we can introduce to other teams whatsoever. We haven't gone much far away from the back office yet. As said, we are using still robots primarily in the back office when it comes to manual entries. But we did, surprisingly in the bank, quite a lot of usage of the robots in the IT, in the test automation, where it saved us tremendously a lot of money. Still, looking at this, is it a densogram or something? You can understand actually the main purpose. Lessons learned in general would be looking at that. Start with something rather small, don't overpromise, but start with something small where you have very good low-hanging fruits to be able to show to your management what exactly are you doing. What is very important is to find some processes which are really reducing the pain to the people who are actually doing this boring manual entry administrative work. Because these people you will need down the road to help you configure those robots. These people will be needed also to administer and govern actually those robots. However, without their help, you can proceed up to a certain level. But the problem is, through those circles, you will not only learn a lot about and be able to configure those servers quite well, but you will be also able to learn through that process where it really makes to implement those robots. Because, as I mentioned already at the very beginning, you should be careful not to fall in love with this one piece of technology against each other, because with robots, you have a big threat that you are actually freezing the status quo on some systems and processes. Because once when you generate a lot of robots, it will be very difficult to change the process. Change the process in a way to just introduce or change the tool. Because as I said, those robots, although they are nice and configurable, they are, let's be frank, very stupid. They know only exactly what you told them to do, and to click to not to exact button, but on exact place on the screen. And if this button is moved a little bit left or right or up and down in some set or release, you have to reconfigure the robot again, which is stupid, but this is the way it is. They are not that smart as you would expect. Now, I would like to finish these lessons learned with some numbers. I have saw a lot of numbers from different organizations claiming how much they have saved money and everything, and time and efforts and whatsoever. I will not be that glorifying. Actually, I would like to share only 2 numbers. just to give you a glimpse what can be done, but also how those numbers could be dangerous if you're not using them properly. Let's start with one nice but also positive number, where we were claiming our first victory, saying, look how much time we have saved in pure manual work in mentioned entry of the contract data from complex syndicated loans. This was very good use cases at the very beginning. There was no possibility actually to do it other way around than with a robot, because the systems which we were using them were rather well integrated within our bank. But as mentioned, in the complex loan, you have a lot of data from other banks, and since banks are not that well connected to transact the contractual data, unlike payments, you end up sooner or later with a lot of manual entry of the contract data from different participants. This is the process which could not have been done the other way around better than with the robots, and the number is quite impressive. But on the other hand, the other number, which was even more impressive than this one, where we said, okay, we introduced one robot which was completely eliminating the number of errors due to the manual transfer between data from two different systems. We were very happy and proud, and claiming it as a big victory, until we thought a little bit about it and said, look, putting a robot on the top of the different front ends just to retype the data between the front ends, instead of doing proper integration on the server level, database level whatsoever, is a wrong thing to do. Because although integration of the system might take longer and might be more expensive and whatsoever, this integration is more reliable, more long-lasting, if you wish, because it does not depend that much on the software version, if you wish, if data model is not changing, and usually is not changing. So be very careful not to over-robotize your environment, not to introduce too many robots where it's really not necessary, because all those robots will need sooner or later to be updated alongside of the updates of the processes you are doing, the versions of the software, and so on. And then you may find yourself in another problem of a lot of effort being spent on governing and maintaining those different robots. And with that, I would like to close my presentation. I hope it was, at least you have heard something new and useful enough for yourself. Some lessons learned which we can use. And I'm opening the floor for the questions. I'm now looking at the chat if there are any question. Okay.
Thank you, David, for the presentation. And if you have any question, you can feel free to leave your question in the chat, or you can turn on your microphone to ask David directly.
Yeah, that would be, at least turn the microphone and say hi. It was a strange experience speaking for 40 minutes without hearing or seeing people at all. I hope somebody's still there. So,
hello. I think I can see someone has turned on the microphone, and
yeah.
I'm not sure if I'm not sure.
I think there is one question from Mark.
Oh, right.
What's your opinion about business and IT collaboration about building solution, how to govern and how to convince CIO who sees risks? Actually, I don't have a simple answer on that. First of all, I have tried to, in the last several years, to build in my, actually I'm heading the part of the team which in bank terms is called Orga and IT. Orga is actually the layer which is taking care about the projects, the business analysis and so on, and classical IT. And those guys especially the IT guys have certain pride, like, you know, we are IT, we are delivering nice solutions and so on. Especially the guys who are working on the very sexy front ends for the mobile apps and so on. However, I managed to introduce the kind of a culture saying, look guys, yes, we are IT, we are very proud and cool and whatsoever, but our mission is actually support the bank to do their business. We are not here to sell beautiful applications to the clients. Most of our work is here to help business deliver their sales and serve their customers, and after all, earn the money for us, because we are paid by them. We are not on the upper market. We are part of the bank IT, so we are as good as bank is good. And in that context, first of all, there was a kind of, you know, shaking hands towards the business, but also business understood it and welcomed it, because previously there was a kind of a wall between IT and business, and I sense that this question is originated out of that angle. And the best way to actually tear that wall down was to say, look, first of all, we are here for us, we are here for you. We are here to help you do your business better. Let us better understand what you are doing and not bother you with a lot of questions, because otherwise you have to explain us what you need. But on the other side, we need to think about how you can be more productive, how you could be better in doing your work, but focusing on your work. Because the other side of the problem is if business doesn't get what they need, they have a tendency to try to micromanage IT, and then we are stepping on each other's toes. Then there is a lot of mistrust and, you know, bad language between it, and this doesn't work. So partnership has to be done on the common layer to say, what are we here for? And we as IT in a bank are here for the bank, who is here for our clients. So we are all in the same boat working for our clients. That's how we kind of set it up. Yes, it's a lot of cliches, but well, it was surprisingly needed lesson for quite a lot of people. The CIOs see a lot of risks, especially if they have the business background. If they have the IT background, they see the world differently. But you have to understand from the IT side that, well, if you are in a bank, work for a bank, in the IT work for a bank, well, bank is very risk-averse institution. So they see everything through budgets and risks, and you need to be able to explain them the world through the budgets and risk, which means if you want to sell them robotization, you need to be able to say, well, this is cool, this is how the robot looks like, but look, these are the risks. I know and I saw them and I understand them from your point of view, and this is how we are going to manage those risks. So if you are able to speak their language in that way and be prepared proactively in that, then you are able to get that fear away. I hope it answers your questions. Just say hi, yes, no, or I don't know, write me something. I will move in the meantime to a next question from Trile. Okay, thank you. Do you have a cost, time to delivery, or other criteria or threshold that you use to determine whether you implement a bot or perform the IT integration? Well, there is no silver bullet to that. If you are thinking about the costs and everything, you need to have a look. If I'm understanding the question right, partially is the overall time to delivery. What should be the threshold for the robots? I didn't fully understand the question, part of the question about the bots. I think it's about the chatbots, if I'm not mistaken. So let me first answer the first one. When it comes to robots, you should think in the time chunks of weeks, for example. So if you would consider starting from the scratch and trying, if I would now start to sell it, coming to another bank and try to sell the whole idea, I would say, look, the piece of software which you need to use costs you several thousand euros. So for the bank, this is not a big deal. Second of all, in order to find and identify some low-hanging fruits, practically you need to sit in the back office and work with those guys, shadow those guys for about 1, maximum 2 weeks to understand what are the pain points. Sit on a coffee with the guys and understand what they think, where they have a problem, fears, or whatsoever. And out of that, in this densogram, pick up for the step 2, for the sprint, 1 or 2 processes. Configuration and implementation shouldn't take more than 2 weeks, 4 weeks maximum. Because if it takes more, you took too big chunks. That would be my rule of thumb. So you need to be able to configure and deliver something within maximum 2 weeks to show that how it works. It will not be probably perfect, but at least to get a sense of it. And then in our case, the kind of a regular time space in which we were delivering it was rather 2 weeks. Now, when it comes to cost, you need to understand in your organization how those costs are booked and whatsoever. In our organization, IT is in a separate unit, and we are charging literally our person days to the organization. So when we are saying we will give you 1 person who is working 2 weeks on that topic, this equals to 10 person days. 10 person days times the man day rate which we are charging, this is where you get the cost. If you have the IT in the organization, you probably will have the problems identifying the person day rate, but once again, when you got it, this is your unit. So you are talking about 10 to 20 person days per configuration of 1 robot, and you shouldn't have it bigger than that, because again, this would be a rule of the thumb that you took too big bites to work. Regarding the chatbots, I'm sorry, I can't answer because I don't have the experience with this one. So if this was the question, I'm really sorry, I don't have the experience on that one. So yes, please wave a hand if this is answering the question. I'm moving to the next one. It sounds like you are not under the IT umbrella. What functional area of the company do you report to? Actually, I am under the IT umbrella. So let me give you the explanation, quick one, how we are organized. So we are organized in a way that we have a bank called Erste Group Bank, and in that piece of organization we have what we call business. So these are the classical front-end, middleware, backends. So the people doing the banking business. In other part of the organization, which is actually the other company called Erste Group IT, which belongs 100% to a bank, we have the Orga function and the IT function. And I'm head of Orga and IT function for large corporate business, if you wish. So if you would consider it large corporate business line, so those guys who are maintaining finances for large corporations like, I don't know, Red Bull, for example, or OMV or whatsoever, I'm heading their Orga and IT, something like that. Yeah? I hope this answers. So yes, I am under IT umbrella, but I'm covering Orga and IT for the business. Okay. Moving to next question. Are you aware of cases where RPA is integrated with AI to expand the capability of RPA into processes that they are not entirely related? I am aware of it. We haven't done it yet. I can give you few insights on that, but again, it's not from my direct experience. I have heard in several other organizations where they have combined it with AI, but this was primarily in the case when you are transferring. For example, we have implemented currently robotics in the area of the back office where they need to type in certain information into the system. But of course, robots are simply taking information as they are and typing it in. AI can help you in determining, for example, the quality of the data, because a robot will simply take a piece of information and put it in. So if the information is a crap in one system, you will get a crap in the other system. But where you can put the AI somewhere in the middle of those steps, and it's still the question where exactly to implement it, is the QA of the data which is being transferred. For example, this is where we were considering, but we haven't implemented anything of it yet, at least not in the area where I'm responsible for. Okay, next question comes. Okay, thank you, welcome. Is
Right.
there
Yeah, is there any other questions?
I just one question I would like to just read. Is there a general concept among banks discussing RPA about the percent of saved FTEs a year? There is nothing official. At least I have a good connections with colleagues of mine in different organizations, and of course with a certain NDAs around, we are exchanging the data just to get a feeling how much we are able to save, where and how. And if you wish, I mean, just drop me an email or connect to me with LinkedIn, and I can get you in contact with my colleagues, or we can exchange our data. So how much in terms of the numbers? So if I'm looking at the robots which we implemented last year, calculating everything, so I remember a few numbers when we were kind of glorifying ourselves. We were talking about the order of magnitude of 10 full-time FTEs saved with the robots which we have implemented altogether. So 10 full-time FTEs. We are calculating one FTE is about 200 person days per year. So then it's 2,000 person days a year we have saved. Last year we implemented robots in our back office. Okay. Good. Any other questions on the chat or on the microphone? Thank you.
I
Welcome.
think that we have last 7 minutes left here.
Yeah. As said, if you have any other questions, feel free to connect to me via LinkedIn or anything. You will find me. I think I'm the only one with my name on the LinkedIn, so should be easy to find me, or Phoenix can provide you my data.
Right.
And I'll be happy to share the data which I have with you. I'm also curious about the others, so of course it's interesting topic, and I know that there is quite a lot of secrecy and competition between the banks, but not all the banks are competition to each other, so we can exchange good practices.
If there's no further question at the moment, I have put our company email in the chat, so feel free to send your questions, or if you would like to get David's contact, feel free to send us an email. And so thank you for David's presentation today. It was brilliant. And also thank you for everyone participating in this webinar.
Thanks everybody, especially for being here in Friday afternoon. I really appreciate it, and I hope I was entertaining enough for my capabilities altogether. So thanks a lot and have a nice weekend.
Thank you everyone. Have a nice weekend.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.